This episode is supported by Clear Protein. And I've got to say, this one really surprised me. Most protein powders, thick, chalky, and you have to choke them down with some milk. Clear is totally different. It's a whey protein isolate that mixes clear in water. More like a sports drink than a heavy shake. You still get 20 grams of protein per serving with zero sugar, zero lactose, and none of that bloated feeling you get from traditional shakes. The flavors are actually good too. Strawberry watermelon and wild blue raspberry are my go-tos. It's been perfect for after workouts or even just that midday pick-me-up when you don't feel weighted down by food. And because you're a listener, you get 20% off your order, the best discount they offer anywhere. Just head over to Clear Protein and use code ZeroSignal at checkout. That's clear with a K, clearprotein.com, code ZeroSignal.
Hey guys, welcome back to Zero Signal Shorts. Please like and subscribe. Email us at zerosignaltruth@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your feedback and your thoughts. So today, I thought we would talk about the potential recession/depression that could be right around the corner. So looking at the U.S. economic stats, it looks like the overall recession probability is in the 20 to 40% range in the next 12 months. And this is according to JP Morgan. Poly market rates around 40%. So there seems to be a moderate risk. It's a little bit down from higher fears earlier in the year. I know some of these corporations, I think, are urged or nudged by the government to put these odds, make them a little bit less detrimental to the agenda at hand. So currently, as of the October estimate, it looks like the unemployment rate is around 4.4%. So that's rising slowly. It's the highest it's been in the past 4 years. And the number that kind of sticks out to me is the people not participating in the labor market. We have roughly 62.5% participation in the labor market at this time. So that leaves about 100 to 105 million people that are currently unemployed or not looking for a job. That's a scary number. Back in 2015, there was roughly 90 million people not participating. And despite the net gain of about 30 million people in the past 10 years, about 8 to 10 million more people are not participating. So that's a scary number. It makes me take pause and look at that. So I think the group that's particularly harmed by this or that's having an adverse and increased effect is recent college graduates. So their employment rate is around 7.1% depending on what report you look at. So that's the worst in decades. And I think a lot of this has to do with AI automation. So a lot of entry-level white-collar jobs are hit hardest by this AI automation, and a lot of employers are preferring people with experience. So AI is having a direct negative effect on these kids coming out of college. It's interesting. I read an article the other day about college kids getting their undergrads coming out and they're not finding jobs they want. So the underemployment rate for that group is around 41%. So essentially what that means is that 41% of the people coming out of college are working jobs that don't require a degree. They're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt potentially, and they're taking on jobs that are probably hourly jobs that don't really care if they have that college degree or not. Like I said, I was reading an interesting article, and due to this underemployment problem that we have, a lot of these kids are going back to get their MBAs or the law degree. So one of two things happens here. I think both happen here in this situation. So they get even further in debt by taking loans out to finance either getting a law degree or MBA. And two, some of those degrees take 2 to 4 years depending on what you're doing. So when you come out on the other side, not only are you going to be more in debt, but the AI automation is going to replace a ton of white-collared workers. I think they're going to come out the other side to a rude awakening that not only are they further in debt, but there are actually fewer jobs that are going to require these advanced degrees. So let's look at some AI displacement numbers. Just in this year, it's looking like between 100 and 200,000 jobs were erased off the map due to AI. And globally, that number is around 1 to 5 million. And these are just rough estimations. There's really no consensus on the exact total. But I know the tech sector was hit hardest, and I said 100 to 200,000 in the past 2-3 years. 80 to 90,000 of those layoffs took place in 2025 alone. And that was essentially stated to be layoffs citing AI and restructuring. And we know what restructuring means. It means cutting your labor force to reduce your expense to become more profitable. So earlier in the decade, there wasn't a whole lot of stats tracking AI specific losses. That's been a recent metric that's starting to be tracked in the past 2, 3 years. So with the advent of AI and with workers preferring people with experience, recent grads are struggling disproportionately. Their unemployment rate has risen faster than any other group in 2025, often exceeding the national average for the first time in decades. This reverses the historical trend where there was a college premium put on people entering the job market. And again, there are fewer entry-level jobs due to AI automating, and junior roles in tech, data, and HR are just really not needed anymore. But upwards of 15% are actually not participating at all. These are temporary opt-outs, and this is just discouragement from applying to thousands of jobs. You've all seen the TikTok videos, the YouTube videos where people go in, apply for hundreds, if not thousands of jobs, and get no response in return. There's also a big thought that a lot of these job postings are actually not active. It's companies posting on places like Indeed and other hiring websites in order to keep the guys up that they're actually trying to expand, and when in reality, they're really not. And if I was in that situation and I applied for hundreds of jobs and I wasn't getting any sort of feedback or even any interviews, I'd be pretty dang discouraged myself. Again, we're dealing with a culture who puts a big emphasis on a college degree. And I'm not saying that they're not important, but you look at these schools and look at some of the degrees they offer, and they're completely irrelevant to what most people are going to end up doing with their lives. Unless you're going to be a professor studying something like anthropology or sociology, is probably not a job that has a high demand outside of the educational institutes. So again, you have tons of kids going to these universities getting degrees that are not going to translate into the real world. Not only that, employers are preferring people that have real world work experience. I know my degree personally is not relevant to anything I've done in my career. It's a way to get these people into indentured servitude with the debt, barely keeping their head above water and paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month once they enter the workforce to pay down these loans. And then we have just the hard fact that a lot of these people, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, a ton of people saw computer science, coding was the next big thing. But unfortunately, with the advent of AI, a lot of these coders and a lot of these computer scientists are no longer needed or wanted. AI can do these jobs themselves. And this also spills over into other industries. As AI becomes more profound, it gets better. You're going to lose newscasters, you're going to lose actors, you're going to lose influencers. I know there was even a story about a big pushback where companies are using AI models now to display their clothing and their wardrobe. Humans are being slowly pushed to the periphery and being pushed out of a lot of these spaces where AI can come in and take over these roles. So instead of paying someone down the street to act, to read the newscast, to even podcast, they can create these false identities and the corporation can take the money for themselves. They don't have to pay all the insurances, all the health insurance, all the labor rates, the millions of dollars that if someone becomes famous enough, they can keep all this money in their pocket. And on top of that, the cost of living has become very unaffordable, especially for the middle and lower classes. The standard American lifestyle for most people include owning a modest home in a decent area, raising 1 to 3 kids, driving reliable cars, eating out occasionally, saving a little bit at the end of the month to throw in the bank account, and maybe take a vacation once a year if you're lucky. That has shifted from being challenging to effectively out of reach for the majority of households earning a median income or below. So real inflation adjusted, the median household income in 2024 was essentially flat versus pre-pandemic levels in 2019. So the nominal rate was $83,700 in 2024, and that money essentially bought the same amount of goods and services that it would have purchased back in 2019. Wages have not grown that much in the last 5 years. But overall consumer prices have rose 23 to 25% in the same period. And this just leaves most people worse off in real terms in this current time. Pre-pandemic in 2019, the median home price was around $320,000, $330,000. The mortgage payment on average was around, on a $300,000 loan, was 3.5%. So that came out to about $1,350 a month. So in late 2025, and this is just the reality, the median existing home price is $410,000 to $435,000. New homes regularly being sold for $460,000 plus, and a payment on a $350,000 loan at a 6.87% interest rate is $2,300 to $2,500 a month, plus the taxes and insurance. So you're looking at around $3,000. That's more than double what it was in 2019. Just crunching all those numbers, it takes roughly 35 to 45% of gross income just to buy what is considered an affordable home nowadays. 57 to 75% of households can't even afford a $300,000 home. So this is essentially the worst in generations. The classic 3x, 4x income rule for buying a house is dead. Now it's 4 to 5 times your median income to buy a home in most metros, and first-time home buyers are locked out unless, there's a dual high income earning home or some family help. Not only that, I think the rental market is worse. So the national average back in 2019 for a normal one bedroom was $1,100 to $1,200 a month. Now the national average for a one bedroom is around $1,500 to $1,600, and in many metro areas it's 2,000 plus. I don't even want to talk about the 2 or 3 bedroom apartments because you might as well add thousands of dollars on top of that. About half of renters are cost burdened by rent. So if we want to look at groceries and food at home, a typical family basket in 2019 was $800 to $900 a month. The same basket now with the same items, if you were to take them and adjust the prices for inflation, that basket is now $1,100 to $1,200. That's 30 to 35% increase from what it was 6 years ago, extra $300-400 a month versus 2019. And all of this on top of wages that really haven't grown in proportion with the rate of inflation, the rate of the housing market. Looking at cars, the average transaction price for a car in 2019 for a brand new car was $38,000 to $40,000. Now, just to get a new car, you're looking at $50,000 plus. I can't tell you how many cars are out there at 60, 70, 80,000. The monthly payment is usually at 72 months at 7 to 9%. So just to get a car now, you're looking at 750, 850 plus insurance and gas. The era of this reliable new family car under 30,000 is over. Most affordable cars are now stripped to base models or tiny crossovers, these little cars you get into. And if you're over 6 foot tall, you're struggling to get in and out, not to mention your wife and your kids and throw them in the back. I know Trump just introduced the concept of a 50-year mortgage. If you look at that, doesn't really lower your payments that much every month. All that does is translate into more interest that the banks get over time. So again, another policy that may look good on the surface, but on the back end, a 50-year mortgage, I don't know what you're going to do if you buy a house when you're 40. Are you going to work till you're 90 years old to pay this bad boy off, assuming that you're lucky enough to live that long? The extras hundreds of $1,000s in interest payments that the bank is reaping on the back end. So just not sugarcoating it. If you're a medium household income or below, the 1950s to 1990s version of the American dream is mathematically impossible for most of the people in the country. Without extreme sacrifice, and you don't have kids, you don't have cars, you don't want roommates forever, you don't want retirement savings, you're treading water at best, and you're slowly drowning at worst. And if you're in the bottom 40%, household income of less than 60,000, you're already in survival mode. You're probably using food banks, working multiple jobs, skipping doctor visits, and you're in perpetual debt. If you're in the top 20%, on the other hand, you're fine or better. Your assets are inflating. The stock market keeps blowing up. Recently, in the past few days, it's starting to show cracks. But we'll get into that here in a minute, and I think that has a lot to do with AI. But in the past year, if you had a 401k or if you invested, your assets are just growing faster and faster. It doesn't even make sense to me logically. In my opinion, a lot of the stock market is inflated by companies investing in 401ks. So that's the money that you take out of your paycheck, tax-free. Your company, at least I know at one point a lot of companies would match up to a certain percentage, and I know a lot of them are getting rid of that. The government does not want the stock market crash to have millions of people, their savings to be decimated. I know that happened in 2008. I knew a guy who had roughly $1 million plus in his 401k, and seemingly overnight, that value was essentially halved. I can't imagine if you're on the cusp of retirement and you watch your 401k lose half its value in a matter of a week. And on top of that, the illegal immigrant surge in the past 4 years has had a pretty profound effect on the cost of owning a house. So just low estimates, that accounts for an additional 5 to 15% spike within the housing market. They want to say that it's a minor driver overall, but 5 to 15% on a $300,000-400,000 house is fairly significant, and it's definitely having an effect on the American citizen. When we look in terms of rent, it's caused a pretty moderate increase. The highest estimate is around 25%. Again, it's significant. And that 25% is in high flow metro areas where these illegals decided to come once they got into the country. Nationally, it's around 3 to 8%. But still, those percentage points over time are huge. And on top of all that, with this illegal immigration, it does suppress wages. You have these people taking jobs at a significantly lower rate than, say, the average American would. Again, I know they're taking jobs that are less skilled, but still, as opposed to making $20 to $25 an hour for some of these really difficult, labor-intensive jobs, they can pay an illegal alien under the table 12 to 15. Again, it has a direct correlation between the wages not increasing as fast as inflation is over time. I read another interesting story. I think it came out in the past week. So today is November 18th. Just to put this in context as to when I'm getting this information and sharing it. But Trump put out, I guess, a directive mandate. I'm not real sure what happened to it. I know there's been a lot of pushback, but he wanted to give 600,000 H-1B1 visas specifically to college kids to come into our universities, mostly Chinese and Indian. So when I look at this, it's irritating that the state college systems were set up to make college affordable without having to travel far away to get a decent education. What I like to call the educational industrial complex. These colleges have become businesses. When your kids go to college, even in-state tuition for some of these places can be pretty astronomical depending on where you're living, unless you somehow get a grant or get a scholarship. If you look at in-state tuition versus out-of-state tuition can be roughly twice, if not greater, in terms of what these kids are paying. So these H-1B visa kids come in from different countries. Typically what happens is China, India, or whatever country they're coming from, they sponsor these kids and pay for them to go to college here. And that compared to the in-state, out-of-state, to someone who is on the H-1B visa, the H-1B visa costs significantly more than a kid going to college from within the state or even out of the state for that matter. So for these colleges, they have an incentive to take on the kid with the visa because they can charge tens of thousands of dollars more per year. And not only does this keep there's only a finite amount of spots in a college education system. So for every one that you bring in, you're leaving a kid stranded who wants to go to school within the US, probably within the state, and that spot is taken up from a kid from a different country. So I don't know how that puts America first. I don't know how that makes America better. I just don't know why we're not prioritizing, especially our youth, in making college affordable without putting kids into hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And that's just to get a bachelor's degree. That's not to mention a master's or a doctorate. So again, these college institutions need to get out of this business model and make college affordable. I don't know why someone has to go into significant debt in order to get just an average education. The kind of scary thing is with the advent of AI, the GDP growth for the past year is not that significant. It's slowly going down. So we're just going to talk about the US GDP. So in the first quarter of 2025, it was around 0.6%. So that's a pretty small number. In Q2, it was 3.8%. Again, not beating the brakes off of it. That's not terrible, but not where we want to be. As of November 17th, 2025, they're estimating a 4.1% GDP growth for quarter three. But the consensus forecast for the full year of 2025, once adjusted, when these numbers initially come out, I don't think they're very accurate. But they're predicting around for the year of 2025, a net growth of 1.7 to 1.8%. So that is not. It's not super good. But the scary thing is that most of this GDP growth is coming from the investment in AI. So without that, there would be negative GDP growth for the country. So the GDP is contracting. So the GDP growth attributed to AI varies all over the place, but typically it lands around 0.8 to 1.5% percentage point. So if you look at the annualized GDP of 2025 for the US, it's right around that number. So it would either be flat or negative. So in 2024, AI CapEx contributed roughly 30 to 40% of total real GDP growth. In 2025, they're predicting that anywhere from 50 on the low side to 90% on the high side is the AI contribution to the nation's GDP growth. And on top of that, almost 100% of this impact is front-loaded from Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Apple, NVIDIA supply chain. Actual productivity efficiency gains from deploying AI are still negligible in the official numbers. Economists like Goldman Sachs and McKinsey expect to start to see these show up meaningfully not until 2027. And that's assuming that there's not an AI bubble, which we're going to talk about next. But before that, I just want to belabor the point. So right now, the US economy is being completely propped up by the AI investment boom. I just want to touch on that briefly. We've talked about in some of our episodes. So, not only is this AI investment propping up GDP, it's actually squeezing out the middle and lower classes. When these server farms are built, they take an incredible amount of energy, they take an incredible amount of infrastructure, which a lot of these are being offset by taxpayer dollars. When a big company comes into a city, they typically get pretty significant tax breaks. What that means is they're paying these companies to build their investment, which means that you are. And not only that, your energy prices are going to go up, your water prices are going to go up. In 99 out of 100 cases, your infrastructure is not built to withstand that sort of load on the system. So again, another way for the consumer or for the taxpayer to essentially provide corporate welfare in order for these companies to build their investments. And so the other scary thing, when we go back to this potential AI bubble, so let's just say this AI bubble bursts, and I think it's starting to show some cracks as to that it might happen here in the next 6 to 18 months. So let's say NVIDIA comes out, and this is just a theoretical situation. Let's say they have a disappointment earnings call. They would end up slashing anywhere between 50 to 80% of their spending, and the macro fallout would be sharp. It would be very concentrated and very painful. Even though the AI economy is still a relatively small part of the whole GDP, a direct hit of 1.5 to 3 percentage point in the first year could happen essentially overnight. AI related fixed investments, like I said, currently adding 1 to 1.5% to the GDP. It accounts for roughly 50 to 90% of the growth in 2025. So let's just flip that contribution to negative on the real US GDP, and that goes from 1.5 to 0.5 or worse almost in an instant. That would be a huge sector bloodbath. And NVIDIA alone is 6 to 7% of the entire S&P 500. A realistic 70 to 80% drawback, which translates to 15 to 20 trillion in valuation, drags the Nasdaq down 30 to 45%. The S&P is hit with a 25 to 35% loss, and 401ks and pension funds will get obliterated overnight. So again, this is a complex theoretical problem, but this would cause a massive recession. Layoffs would essentially hit within the first week. You would lose 200 to 500,000 high-skilled tech jobs and construction jobs overnight, because construction is a big part in building these AI data centers, and then affect another 1 to 2 million workers from suppliers, real estate services, and etc. With recent college grads already at almost a 6 to 7% unemployment rate, they would get absolutely crushed, and the entire AI fallout would just absorb all the smart kids. And overnight, again, they would lose their jobs. So if that bubble bursts in 26 or 27, the kind of peak to trough, you're looking at a -3% to -6% GDP growth, or I guess shrink. And that would be worse than the dot-com bubble. Theoretically, unemployment would peak at 9%. I don't even know what that number would translate into people that are not participating in the labor market, but I'm guessing it would add millions on top of that. And finding a job would not be an easy thing to do. Not that it is now. I feel sorry for anyone that's going through those struggles. I guess the only thing we really have going for us, it would not be another 2008 type crash where the banking system was so leveraged that banks started to fail. Right now, the housing market doesn't seem to be in desperate shape. It's getting worse, but it's still overall it's in good shape. So it would not be as brutal as the dot-com bust, but it would just be faster and more concentrated. It would hurt just as bad. A lot of people think that the economy is recession-proof because of AI, but I think that's a pipe dream, and people inflating their egos and their worth and trying to make that statement. So all in all, I think with everything that's coming around the corner and some of these articles that we're seeing, I think recession is a real possibility in the near future, and we just got to prepare, spend wisely, pray, get your finances in order, and try to find a way to hedge and mitigate your risk. As I always like to say, we love you, Jesus love you, and I hope you guys have a great day. If you have any questions, comments, be sure to like and subscribe, and email us at zerosignaltruth@gmail.com. I hope you all have a great day.